I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. At my daughter's wedding, she handed me a note from her bouquet that said, "Mom, help me." I thought I was protecting her by staying quiet about what I knew. I had no idea she'd been listening too. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Camila Rodriguez, and I spent 40 years as an engineer before I retired to my ranch in Colorado. People look at me now 62 years old, wearing flannel shirts and driving a truck older than some marriages, and they assume I'm just another widow trying to make ends meet on Social Security. They have no idea. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story really begins 6 months ago on a cold November morning when my daughter Charlotte brought home the man who would nearly destroy everything. It was Thanksgiving. I'd spent 2 days preparing David's favorite recipes. He'd been gone 3 years, but I still cooked like he was coming home. The turkey the stuffing made from his grandmother's recipe, the sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow top that Charlotte had loved since she was 5 years old. Charlotte arrived first, as always. She pulled up in her sensible Honda, and I watched from the kitchen window as she sat in the driver's seat for a moment, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. That should have been my first clue. My daughter never cared about makeup. She was the girl who'd spent her childhood covered in dirt from helping her father in the garden, who'd shown up to her high school graduation with hay in her hair because she'd been feeding the horses that morning. But that day she'd curled her hair, put on lipstick, wore a dress instead of her usual jeans. When she walked through the door, her smile was different too, wider, more nervous. "Mom," she said, and I could hear it in her voice, the thing she was about to tell me, the thing she was excited and scared about in equal measure. "There's someone I want you to meet." That's when Nolan Pierce walked into my home. He was handsome in that carefully constructed way that some men manage, the kind of handsome that comes from expensive haircuts and gym memberships, and knowing exactly which angle shows off your jawline. 35 years old, maybe 6 feet tall, wearing a sweater that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, extending his hand with a smile that showed perfectly white teeth. "It's such an honor to finally meet you. Charlotte talks about you constantly." I shook his hand. It was soft. Too soft. This was a man who'd never spent a day doing manual labor in his life. "Call me Camilla," I said, because that's what polite people say. "And you must be Nolan. Charlotte's been mysterious about you." He laughed. Charlotte laughed. I didn't. "I told her I wanted to wait until it was serious before introducing us," Nolan said, sliding his arm around Charlotte's waist in a way that was just possessive enough to make my engineer's mind register a data point. "Didn't want to waste your time with someone who wasn't going to stick around." "Well," I said, turning back to the kitchen because I needed a moment to process. "You're here now. Charlotte, can you help me with the turkey?" In the kitchen, Charlotte was practically vibrating with excitement. "Mom, isn't he amazing?" she whispered, even though Nolan was in the living room and definitely couldn't hear us. "We met at this networking event 3 months ago, and it's just been—" "Mom, I think he's the one." 3 months. My daughter, who'd spent 2 years getting over her last relationship, a disaster of a man who'd cheated on her with his personal trainer, had decided after 3 months that Nolan Pierce was the one. "That's wonderful, honey," I said, basting the turkey with more force than necessary. "Tell me about him. What does he do?" "He's an investment advisor. Works at Cordell Financial in Denver. He's really successful, Mom. He manages portfolios for all these wealthy clients." "Investment advisor. Of course." "And what does he know about you?" I asked. Charlotte looked confused. "What do you mean? Does he know you're a marketing director, that you're thinking about starting your own consulting firm? Does he know you hate skiing even though we live in Colorado, and that you cry at dog food commercials, and that you still sleep with that stuffed rabbit your father won you at the state fair when you were 7? "Mom?" Charlotte's smile faltered. "Why are you being like this?" "I'm not being like anything, sweetheart. I'm just asking what he knows about you. The real you." "He knows me," she said, and there was a defensive edge in her voice now. "He knows me better than anyone." I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell her that 3 months isn't enough time to know someone that love shouldn't make you curl your hair and wear lipstick if you've never cared about those things before. That the way he put his arm around her waist felt more like ownership than affection. But I didn't, because I'd learned a long time ago that the fastest way to push your adult daughter toward a mistake is to tell her she's making one. So instead I smiled. "I'm sure he does, honey. Let's get this turkey on the table." Dinner was perfect. The turkey was moist, the stuffing was seasoned just right, and everyone complimented the sweet potato casserole. Nolan was charming. He asked me questions about the ranch, about my engineering career, about how I was managing since David died. He laughed at the right moments and looked serious when appropriate. And he asked about the property. "This is quite a spread you have here, Camilla," he said, looking out the dining room window at the meadow that stretched toward the tree line. "How many acres are 215? I said, "Wow, must be a lot of work maintaining all this on your own." "I manage." "I'm sure you do, but still at your age it has to be getting harder. Have you thought about what you'll do with it long term, I mean?" "At my age," he actually said that, as if 62 was ancient, as if I was 1 foot in the grave and too feeble to notice him circling like a vulture. "I haven't thought about it much," I lied. "This was David's dream. I'm not ready to let it go." "Of course not," Nolan said smoothly. "I didn't mean to suggest. I just meant it's smart to plan ahead. Make sure Charlotte's taken care of, you know." Charlotte smiled at him like he'd just said the most thoughtful thing in the world. I smiled too, and made a mental note. Data point number 2. After dinner, Nolan insisted on helping with the dishes. Charlotte had gone to the bathroom, and I was scraping plates when he spoke again. "Camilla, I hope you don't mind me asking, but where exactly does your property end? I was looking out at those aspen trees earlier, and I couldn't quite tell where the boundary line runs." My hands stilled in the dishwater. "The fence line follows the creek bed," I said slowly. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, just curious. I'm a detail person, comes with the job, I guess. I like to understand how things work." "The property boundaries work just fine without you understanding them," I said, and let the words hang in the air for a moment before adding, "But I appreciate the interest." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Fair enough. I didn't mean to pry." But he did mean to pry. That's exactly what he meant to do. When Charlotte came back, he was all smiles again. They left after coffee, and Charlotte hugged me at the door. "So," she whispered, "what do you think?" I looked at her face, my beautiful daughter, so hopeful, so happy, and I thought about all the ways I could answer that question honestly. "He seems very interested in you," I said instead. "He is, Mom. I really think this is going somewhere." "I'm sure it is, sweetheart." I watched them drive away Nolan's Audi, disappearing down the long dirt road that led back to the highway. Then I went into David's study, my study now, though I still thought of it as his, and pulled out the property deed. 215 acres purchased in 1994 for $80,000. David and I had saved for 5 years to afford the down payment. Back then, it was just scrubland miles from anything cheap because nobody wanted it. Now, with Denver sprawling outward like an infection, developers called me once a month with offers. The last one had been for $4.2 million. I'd never told Charlotte the exact value. She knew we owned the ranch free and clear, knew I had a comfortable retirement, but she didn't know about the patents. She didn't know that the small component I'd invented for industrial refrigeration systems, nothing glamorous, just a more efficient valve mechanism, had been generating royalty payments for 25 years. She didn't know that between those royalties and smart investments, I had $8.3 million in assets. The ranch was the visible part. The rest sat quietly in accounts she'd never asked about, because why would she? Charlotte made good money in marketing. She was independent. She'd never needed to know exactly how wealthy her mother was. But Nolan Pierce wanted to know. I could see it in the way he looked at the property, in the way he asked questions, in that calculated comment about planning ahead and making sure Charlotte was taken care of. I sat in David's leather chair and looked at his picture on the desk, him and Charlotte, when she was 10, both of them covered in mud after building a dam in the creek. His hand was on her shoulder, and they were both laughing. "What do I do?" I asked the picture, even though I knew he couldn't answer. But I already knew what I had to do. I had to be sure. For 23 years, ever since she'd handled the legal work when David and I bought the ranch. She was 55 now, sharp as a tack, with silver-streaked hair she wore in a bun, and a no-nonsense approach to law that I'd always appreciated. "Camilla," she said when I walked into her office in Boulder, "this is a surprise. Everything okay with the property?" "The property's fine. I need you to look into someone for me." Elena raised an eyebrow. "This isn't like you. What's going on?" I told her about Thanksgiving, about Nolan's questions, about the way my gut had twisted when he asked about property boundaries for the second time in one dinner. "You think Charlotte's boyfriend is a gold digger?" Elena said when I finished. I think Charlotte's boyfriend is very interested in my assets and I want to know why. Camila, have you talked to Charlotte about this? And tell her that I have a bad feeling that her boyfriend asked about the property line. She'll think I'm being paranoid, or worse, she'll think I don't trust her judgment. Elena sighed. You know I have to ask, is this about Charlotte's ex? Are you worried because the last one was such a disaster? I'd thought about that. Charlotte's previous boyfriend had been a charming narcissist who'd spent 2 years slowly eroding her confidence before cheating on her with someone he met at his gym. It had taken Charlotte another 2 years to fully recover. Maybe, I admitted, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. Elena was quiet for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll have someone run a background check. Give me his full name and date of birth if you have it. Nolan Andrew Pierce, born March 15, 1989. Elena wrote it down. Give me a week. 5 days later, she called me. Camila, we need to meet. Not on the phone. I drove to Boulder that afternoon. The December weather had turned cold and snow was threatening in the heavy gray clouds that hung over the mountains. I kept the truck's heater on high and tried not to think about what Elena might have found, or what she might not have found. What if I was wrong? What if Nolan was just curious, just making conversation, just trying to get to know his girlfriend's family? What if I was being a paranoid old woman who couldn't let her daughter be happy? But when I walked into Elena's office and saw her face, I knew I wasn't wrong. She closed the door and handed me a folder. Nolan Andrew Pierce is exactly who he says he is, she said. Licensed investment advisor, works for Cordell Financial Group, clean record. No criminal history, no bankruptcies, no lawsuits. But, Elena pulled out another document. I had our investigator dig deeper. Nolan's been engaged twice before, both times to women from wealthy families. Both engagements ended abruptly right after he'd gained access to family financial information. My hands tightened on the folder. The first was Madison Rothschild in 2018, Elena continued. Daughter of tech CEO Harrison Rothschild. They were engaged for 6 months. The engagement ended 2 weeks after Nolan attended a family meeting about estate planning. And the second, Juliana Hartley, 2020 to 2021, daughter of real estate developer William Hartley. Engagement lasted 7 months. Ended shortly after William revised his will. Did they sue him? No. And that's what makes me nervous, Camila. These families don't sue. They pay to make problems disappear quietly. My investigator found evidence of 2 payments, $75,000 to Nolan from the Rothschild Family Trust in 2018 and $120,000 from the Hartley estate in 2021, both recorded as settlement payments with NDAs attached. I felt sick. What about Charlotte? I asked. She doesn't have significant assets of her own. Not yet, Elena said carefully. But if Nolan thinks she's going to inherit this ranch, and he doesn't know its actual value or the extent of your other assets, he might be gambling on future wealth. Or he's researched me and knows exactly what I'm worth. Elena nodded. I had our investigator check. Nolan's been looking at county property records. He knows what you paid for the ranch in 1994, and he can estimate what it's worth now. He probably has a pretty good idea you're sitting on $4 to $5 million in real estate alone. He doesn't know about the patents. Does Charlotte know about the patents? No. Then neither does Nolan. But Camila, even if he only thinks you're worth $4 or $5 million, that's more than enough motive for someone like him. I stared at the folder in my hands. Inside were printed screenshots of Nolan's social media accounts, or rather what was left of them. Elena's investigator had noted that Nolan had deleted all posts from before 2019. His Instagram had been deactivated and reactivated. His LinkedIn profile had a mysterious 18-month gap between 2017 and 2018. I need to talk to one of the previous women, I said. Madison or Juliana. I need to know what he did. They signed NDAs, Camila. They can't talk. Then talk to their families. Off the record. Someone who'll tell me the truth. Elena hesitated. That's going to cost you. My investigator will need to be very careful, very discreet. I don't care what it costs. I need to know if my daughter is in danger. A week later, Elena called me again. My investigator managed to speak with Karen Rothschild Madison's mother. Off the record very carefully. I'm going to play you the recording. Are you sitting down? I was in my kitchen looking out at the snow-covered meadow. Play it. The voice that came through the phone was older, tired, with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to weigh every word. Mrs. Rothschild, I want to be clear, this conversation is completely off the record. We're not asking you to violate your NDA. We just need to understand what kind of person Nolan Pierce is to protect someone else who might be in danger. Is it another young woman? Karen Rothschild's voice was sharp with concern. Yes, ma'am. There was a long pause, then a sigh. That man, he's not violent. Let me be clear about that. He never hurt Madison physically, but he's calculated, manipulative, a predator in his own way. Can you tell us what happened? He was charming at first, swept Madison off her feet, proposed after 4 months. She was thrilled. We were cautious, but we wanted her to be happy. Then he started asking questions about our family trusts, about Harrison's business, about how the estate was structured. He suggested Madison get power of attorney for learning purposes, said it would help her understand the family finances before we were gone. Did your husband agree? Harrison refused, said it was premature, that Madison wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility, yet she was only 26 at the time. Nolan got cold after that, distant. The engagement ended within 2 weeks. Then his lawyer contacted us with implications. What kind of implications? Nothing he could prove. Just suggestions that maybe Harrison had said some things during that estate planning meeting. Things that could be misinterpreted. Things about Madison's trust fund that might not sound good if they became public. It was blackmail, but done so carefully that we couldn't prove it in court. So we paid him to go away and make Madison sign an NDA. How much did you pay him? $75,000. Harrison wanted to fight, but I was afraid of what it would do to Madison. She was already devastated. She blamed herself. Thought she'd driven him away by not standing up to her father about the power of attorney. It took her 2 years of therapy to understand it wasn't her fault. The recording ended. I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone, feeling cold despite the heating running full blast. Camilla, Elena's voice. Are you there? I'm here. There's more. My investigator got a similar story from Juliana Hartley's father, different details, same pattern. Nolan positions himself, gets close to the family finances, then extracts what he can and moves on. And now he's with Charlotte. Yes. What do I do, Elena? You tell Charlotte. Show her this evidence. Let her make her own choice. She won't believe me. She'll think I'm being a controlling mother who doesn't approve of her boyfriend. She'll marry him to prove me wrong, or she'll cut me out of her life for interfering. Camilla. No. I stood up, decision crystallizing. I need him to expose himself. I need Charlotte to see it with her own eyes. I need proof that even she can't deny. Elena was quiet for a long moment. What are you planning? I'm going to give him exactly what he wants. Rope to hang himself with. Christmas came and went. Charlotte and Nolan spent Christmas Eve at the ranch, and I played the role of the welcoming mother. I complimented the expensive wine Nolan brought. I admired the designer watch Charlotte had given him. I listened to their excited talk about maybe moving in together in the new year, and I watched. Nolan asked about the property boundaries again. Casually, while we were walking to feed the horses, he said, "You know, Camilla, I've been thinking about what you said at Thanksgiving, about this being David's dream. But what's your dream? Do you really want to spend the rest of your retirement managing 200 acres alone?" "I manage just fine," I said. "Of course you do, but Charlotte worries about you. She says you're out here all alone, and what if something happened? What if you fell or got sick? There's no one to help. Charlotte worries too much. She loves you. We both do." He put his hand on my shoulder, and it took everything in me not to shrug it off. "I just think maybe it's time to start planning ahead, making sure you're taken care of, making sure Charlotte knows what to do if anything happens." "What exactly do you think should happen?" "I think you should talk to a financial advisor, someone who can help you structure things properly. Estate planning, maybe a trust power of attorney, all the smart things people your age should have in place." People my age, again. "And I suppose you know someone who could help with that?" I asked. His smile widened. "Actually, I'd be happy to help. No charge, family rate. I'm going to be family soon anyway." Data point number 15. Or maybe 20. I'd lost count. "That's very generous," I said. "Let me think about it." After New Year's, I called Elena. "I need a plan, Something that will get Nolan to incriminate himself. Camilla, I really think you should just tell Charlotte. Elena, please, help me with this. She sighed. All right, what did you have in mind? I'm going to tell him I want his help with estate planning. I'll give him access or make him think I'm giving him access. But we'll document everything. Record it. Build a case. Recording someone without their consent is illegal in Colorado, unless one party to the conversation consents. And I'll be that party. Elena was quiet. You know what you're asking me to help you do? I'm asking you to help me protect my daughter from a con artist. All right, she said finally. But we do this carefully, very carefully. And if at any point this starts to feel dangerous, we stop. Agreed? Agreed. The next week I called Nolan. Nolan, it's Camilla. I've been thinking about what you said at Christmas, about estate planning. Are you free sometime this week to come by and talk? He was available immediately, of course. Too immediately. We set a meeting for Saturday afternoon. Elena came over Friday night to set up. This is a voice-activated recorder, she said, showing me a device about the size of a USB drive. It's legal because you're consenting to record a conversation you're participating in. I'm going to put it in your study, hidden in this bookend. When Nolan comes over, have your discussion in there. What if he finds it? He won't. It's designed to be invisible. But Camilla, you need to understand something. This will only work if you can get him to say something incriminating. Just him offering to help with your estate isn't enough. You need him to reveal his real intentions. How do I do that? Ask questions. Let him talk. People like Nolan love to explain how clever they are. Elena also brought documents, fake estate planning papers that showed my assets as worth $12 million instead of 8.3. If he sees these, he'll think you're worth more than you are. It might make him careless. Or more dangerous, I said. Or that. Are you sure about this? I thought about Charlotte, about the way she lit up when Nolan entered a room, about how she'd started dressing differently, acting differently as if she needed to be someone else to keep him interested. I'm sure, I said. Saturday afternoon, Nolan arrived right on time. He parked his Audi in the driveway and walked up to the porch with a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Camilla, he said, flashing that perfect smile. Thanks so much for calling. I'm really excited to help you get everything organized. Come in, I said. Let's talk in my study. I led him to David's office, my office, and gestured to the chair across from the desk. The recorder was hidden in a bookend 5 feet away, aimed directly at where Nolan would sit. He opened his briefcase and pulled out folders. Okay, so I've put together some basic structures that I think would really benefit you. Let's start with your current situation. Do you have a will? Yes. Basic will leaving everything to Charlotte. That's good, but not optimal. With a property like this, you're going to get hit with estate taxes that could eat up 40% of Charlotte's inheritance. But if we set up a revocable living trust, we can minimize that. He talked for 20 minutes about trusts and tax optimization and asset protection, and I nodded along, playing the role of the confused older woman who didn't quite understand finance. Then he pulled out a document. This is a power of attorney form, he said. It's a smart thing to have in place at your age. Sorry, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean you're living alone out here, and if something happened, if you got sick or had an accident, who would pay your bills? Who would manage the property? With this, Charlotte would be able to handle everything for you. Charlotte and who else? I asked because I'd been reading the document while he talked. Well, me as her spouse. We're getting engaged soon. I'm planning to propose next month, actually. He smiled like he'd just told me wonderful news. Don't tell Charlotte I spoiled the surprise, but once we're married, this will let both of us help you if you need it. Help me how? Managing your finances, making decisions about the property, whatever you need. What if I don't need help? He laughed. Camilla, everyone needs help eventually. That's just reality. You're 62 years old living alone on a ranch that requires constant maintenance. At some point, you're going to need someone to step in. And you want it to be you. I want it to be Charlotte, he corrected smoothly. But as her husband, I'd naturally be involved. That's what families do, they help each other. I pretended to study the document. This gives you a lot of power. It gives Charlotte the power to help you. I'm just there to support her. What about the property? This says you could make decisions about selling or transferring assets. Only if you were incapacitated and needed someone to make decisions for you. It's just a safeguard, Camilla. Nobody's planning to sell your ranch out from under you. But the way he said it, the slight emphasis on nobody's planning, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You've been very interested in this property," I said carefully. "You ask about the boundaries every time you visit. Why is that?" He didn't miss a beat. "Because Charlotte's going to inherit it someday, and I want to understand what that means, what it's worth, how we might manage it." "How much do you think it's worth?" "Well, you bought it in 1994 for $80,000. Property values around Denver have increased about," he did mental math, "probably 60 times since then. So I'd estimate this place is worth somewhere between $4 and $6 million, depending on development rights and zoning." He'd done his homework. Of course he had. "That's a lot of money," I said. "It is, which is why it's so important to have proper estate planning in place, to protect Charlotte's inheritance. And if Charlotte inherited it while we were married, you'd have access to that wealth too." His smile faltered for just a second. "Camilla, I don't need Charlotte's money. I'm a successful investment advisor. I manage millions of dollars in client assets." "Other people's millions," I said quietly. "What, eh? You manage other people's money. That's not the same as having it yourself." The mask slipped, just for a moment. His jaw tightened and something cold flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone and the smile was back. "You're right," he said. "I'm not independently wealthy like some of my clients, but I do well for myself. And I love Charlotte for who she is, not for what she might inherit someday." "Of course you do," I said. "I'm sorry if that came out wrong. I'm just trying to understand all of this." He relaxed. "I get it. It's a lot of information. Why don't I leave these documents with you? You can review them, talk to your own lawyer if you want, and we can meet again next week." "Actually," I said, "there's one more thing I wanted to ask you about. I've been having some memory problems lately. Nothing serious, but I'll forget where I put my keys or I'll tell Charlotte the same story twice without realizing it. Do you think that's something I should be worried about?" I watched his eyes light up. "It's very common at your age," he said, leaning forward. "And honestly, it's another reason why having a power of attorney in place is so important. If your memory issues progress, you'll want someone who can step in and help manage things before it becomes a real problem." "You think it could get worse?" "It's possible. Dementia, Alzheimer's, these things often start small, a little forgetfulness here and there. Then it progresses." He paused like he was considering his words carefully. "Has Charlotte noticed anything?" "I haven't mentioned it to her. I don't want her to worry." "Maybe you should mention it, just casually. She deserves to know if you're having cognitive issues, especially if she's going to be responsible for helping you someday." There it was. He wanted me to plant the seeds of doubt in Charlotte's mind myself. Make her think I was declining. Make her believe I needed help managing my affairs. Make her trust him when he said it was time for him to take over. "You're right," I said. "I'll talk to her." Nolan smiled. "Good. And Camilla, please don't worry too much about this. We're family now. We'll take care of you." After he left, I sat in the study for a long time staring at the bookend that held the recorder. Then I called Elena. "Did you get it?" she asked. "Every word." Elena came to the ranch the next morning with a woman I'd never met before. "Camilla, this is Patricia Kim. She's a private investigator who specializes in financial fraud cases." Patricia was 45, compact and efficient-looking with short black hair and eyes that seemed to notice everything. She shook my hand with a firm grip. "Mrs. Rodriguez Elena's filled me in on the situation. I've reviewed the recording from yesterday, and I've looked at the background information on Nolan Pierce. I'll be direct, this man is dangerous." "Dangerous how?" I asked. "He's not violent, is he?" "Not physically from what we can tell, but he's a sophisticated con artist. The pattern with Madison Rothschild and Juliana Hartley suggests he's done this before, refined his approach. What worries me is the escalation." "What do you mean?" Patricia pulled out her laptop and opened a file. "Madison's family paid him off quickly. He got $75,000 and moved on. With Juliana, he held out for $120,000. That suggests he's getting greedier, more confident. And your situation is different from the others." "How so?" "Madison and Juliana both had trust funds controlled by their fathers. Nolan couldn't access those directly. He needed the families to transfer wealth to the daughters first. But Charlotte has no significant assets. The only way Nolan profits from this relationship is if you die or become incapacitated and Charlotte inherits. That makes you the obstacle." The words hung in the air like a threat. "You think he'd hurt me?" I said slowly. I think he's capable of creating situations where you get hurt, a fall down the stairs, a medication error, an accident. Nothing that would point directly to him, but enough to achieve his goal. Elena put her hand on my arm. Camila, I think we should go to the police with what we have. What do we have? I asked. A recording of him offering estate planning services, suggesting I might have memory problems. That's not a crime. The pattern was the previous women. Isn't proof of anything related to Charlotte. Their families paid him to go away, which means there's no criminal record. Just settlements covered by NDAs. I looked at Patricia. Am I right? She nodded reluctantly. Legally, you're in a difficult position. What Nolan's done so far is manipulative and unethical, but not necessarily criminal. We need him to make an explicit threat or reveal his actual intentions. Then we keep recording, I said. That's risky, Patricia warned. If he suspects you're onto him, he might accelerate his timeline, or he might disappear and find another target. Leaving Charlotte heartbroken but safe, Elena added. I thought about that. About Nolan vanishing from Charlotte's life, moving on to some other unsuspecting woman. About my daughter spending months or years recovering from another betrayal, never knowing the truth about what she'd escaped. No, I said. Charlotte needs to see who he really is. She needs to understand what he was planning. Otherwise, she'll blame herself. Or worse, she'll let him back in. Patricia studied me for a moment. You're sure about this? I'm sure. All right, then we do this properly. I'll install surveillance equipment around the property cameras and audio. All legal since it's your land and you're consenting. We'll document everything Nolan does and says when he's here. But Mrs. Rodriguez, you need to be careful. Very careful. Don't confront him. Don't let him know you suspect anything. I've been playing this role for months, he said. I can keep playing it. Over the next week, Patricia transformed my ranch into a surveillance operation. Tiny cameras hidden in bird feeders, audio recorders in fence posts, motion sensors along the driveway. All of it invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. The system feeds to a secure server, she explained. I'll monitor it remotely, but you'll also have access on your phone. If anything happens, anything at all that makes you uncomfortable, you call me immediately. Charlotte came to visit that weekend alone. Nolan had some work commitment in Denver, she said. We had lunch on the porch, and I tried not to think about the camera hidden in the eaves above us, recording everything. Mom, you seem distracted, Charlotte said, pushing her salad around her plate. Is everything okay? Just tired, honey. I didn't sleep well last night. Maybe you should see a doctor. Get checked out. I looked at her sharply. Why would you say that? I don't know, you just seem off lately. Nolan mentioned you'd talked about having some memory issues. There it was. He'd already started planting seeds. I told Nolan I forget where I put my keys sometimes, I said carefully. That's not memory issues, Charlotte. That's being human. I know, but at your age... At my age, I'm 62, not 90. I'm perfectly healthy. Charlotte looked hurt. I didn't mean it like that. I just worry about you out here alone. I'm fine, I said more gently. But thank you for worrying. That's what daughters do. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Nolan worries too. He really cares about you, Mom. About both of us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her everything about Madison and Juliana, about the power of attorney forms, about the way Nolan had calculated the value of my property like a hawk circling prey. Instead, I said, he seems very thoughtful. He is. Mom, I think he's going to propose soon. Like really soon. My chest tightened. What makes you say that? Just a feeling. The way he talks about the future. About us. About family. She leaned forward, excited. I think he might do it on Valentine's Day. Wouldn't that be romantic? Valentine's Day was 3 weeks away. Very romantic, I managed. After Charlotte left, I sat on the porch for a long time watching the sunset behind the mountains. The temperature was dropping fast the way it does in Colorado winters, and I should have gone inside. But I couldn't move. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia, recording from last night. You need to hear this. I drove to Boulder that evening. Patricia's office was above a coffee shop, a small space filled with computer equipment and file cabinets. She pulled up the recording on her laptop. This was captured at 2:15 a.m. last night, she said, from the audio device near your porch. Who was at my porch at 2 in the morning? Listen, she pressed play. At first, all I heard was wind and the distant sound of the creek, then voices, male voices, 2 of them. Sure, this is a good idea, coming out here in the middle of the night. Relax. The old woman sleeps like the dead. I checked no lights on in the house. Nolan's voice. I'd recognize it anywhere. Okay, so walk me through it again. What's the timeline? Simple. I propose on Valentine's Day. Charlotte says yes, she will. I've laid all the groundwork. We have a short engagement, maybe 4 months. Wedding in June. And then I start the campaign. Subtle stuff at first. Honey, did your mom seem confused when we talked about X? I think she forgot she told us that story already. Plant the seeds that Camila's declining mentally. The second voice, I didn't recognize it. Younger, maybe. Uncertain. What if Charlotte doesn't buy it? She will. She's already primed. I mentioned Camila having memory problems and Charlotte immediately jumped to worrying about her. Classic caregiver anxiety. All I have to do is amplify it. And the power of attorney. I'll get Camila to sign it before the wedding. Tell her it's smart to have in place just in case. She's already receptive to the idea. Once I have that, I can start moving money around. Small amounts at first, nothing Charlotte would notice. Set up accounts in Camila's name that I control. Jesus, Nolan. What? It's not like I'm stealing. I'm managing her assets. If she asks, I'll say it's for estate optimization. Old people hear jargon and freeze up. They don't want to admit they don't understand, so they just nod along. And if she doesn't ask, there was a pause. When Nolan spoke again, his voice was colder. Then in 6 months, maybe a year, Camila has an accident. Something believable. She's 62, living alone on 200 acres. Falls happen. Medication gets confused. Old people have strokes, heart attacks. It's tragic, but it happens. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about nature taking its course with a little help. And I'm not doing anything myself, I'm just not preventing what might naturally occur. There's a difference. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the edge of Patricia's desk. The second voice spoke again, louder now. This is insane. I thought we were just talking about financial manipulation, not bait. Keep your voice down. Look, Vincent, I brought you in on this because you're my partner. Pierce Hayes. Development needs capital, and this property is worth at minimum $4.2 million. Probably more if we subdivide it right. When Camila dies, Charlotte inherits. We're married, so it's community property. If Charlotte and I divorce after a year, amicably irreconcilable differences, I get half. $2 million minimum plus whatever I skim from the accounts before that. Your cut is 40% of the land profit. That's $800,000 for doing nothing except keeping your mouth shut. I don't know, man. This feels different from the other ones. The other ones were practice. Madison and Juliana taught me what not to do. Their families were too sophisticated, too protective. But Camila Rodriguez is perfect. Small-town widow, no sophistication about protecting assets, daughter who thinks mommy's just a regular middle-class retiree. This is the score, Vincent. The one we've been waiting for. There was a long silence. Then Vincent spoke quieter now. What do you need from me? Just be my best man. Show up to the wedding, smile, support the happy couple. After that, stay available. I might need you to witness documents or provide alibis. Can you do that? Yeah, I can do that. Good. Now let's get out of here before someone sees us. The recording ended with footsteps crunching on gravel, then silence. I looked at Patricia. Her face was grim. That's conspiracy to commit fraud, she said. And depending how you interpret nature taking its course with a little help, possibly conspiracy to commit murder. We have to go to the police, I said. We can, but Camila, you need to understand what will happen. The police will investigate. They'll arrest Nolan, probably Vincent too. But a good lawyer will argue that Nolan was speaking hypothetically, that he never intended to actually do anything, that it was just idle speculation between friends. Without evidence of an actual attempt to harm you, the charges might not stick. What about Charlotte? She'll be devastated, humiliated. Her fiancé arrested for planning to defraud and possibly kill her mother. That's going to be front-page news in every Denver paper. And Camila, there's a chance she won't believe it. Nolan will claim the recording is taken out of context, that he was joking, that you manipulated the situation. Charlotte might choose to believe him. I closed my eyes. So what do? You make Charlotte see it for herself. You expose Nolan in a way that she can't deny with witnesses she trusts. You take away his ability to manipulate the narrative. At the wedding, I said slowly. Patricia nodded. At the wedding, but that means letting this play out for 4 more months. Letting him propose, letting Charlotte plan a wedding, letting him think he's won. And what if he doesn't wait? What if he decides to accelerate his timeline? That's why I'm monitoring the property 24/7. If he makes a move, we'll know. And Camilla, you're not doing this alone. I'll have backup ready. Elena's coordinating with law enforcement. We have a sheriff who's willing to attend the wedding in plain clothes just in case. Sheriff Morrison. You know him. He and David were friends, used to go fishing together. Patricia smiled slightly. Then you have someone you trust. But for the next 4 months, you have to be the best actress of your life. Can you do that? I thought about David, about Charlotte, about the ranch we'd built and the life we'd dreamed of for our daughter. I can do that, I said. Valentine's Day arrived with fresh snow and bright sunshine. Charlotte called me that morning, her voice vibrating with excitement. Mom, Nolan's taking me to that new restaurant in Denver tonight, the one with the Michelin star. He's been so mysterious about it. I think tonight's the night. That's wonderful, honey, I said, gripping the phone too tight. Will you come dress shopping with me this weekend? If he proposes, I want to start planning right away. I've always dreamed of a summer wedding. Of course, whatever you need. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed watching the shadows from the moonlight on snow move across the ceiling and waited for Charlotte's call. It came at 11:30. Mom, she was crying, but they were happy tears. Mom, he proposed. We're engaged. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you. The lies were getting easier. That terrified me. The ring is beautiful, 3 carats platinum band. He said he's been saving for it for months. Mom, I can't believe this is happening. I'm getting married. Tell me everything, I said, because that's what mothers do. She talked for an hour. About the restaurant the violinist Nolan had hired, the way he'd gotten down on one knee right there in front of everyone. About how the whole restaurant had applauded. About how she'd cried and said yes immediately. We're thinking June, she said. June 15th, at the ranch, if that's okay with you. I want to get married where Dad and I used to watch the sunset. Where you and Dad got married. My wedding. Charlotte wanted to use my wedding venue to marry a man who was planning to kill me. That would be beautiful, I managed. After we hung up, I went downstairs and poured myself a glass of David's whiskey, the expensive bottle we'd been saving for special occasions. Then I sat on the porch in the freezing cold and cried. I cried for my daughter's happiness that was built on lies. I cried for the wedding she was planning that would never happen the way she imagined. I cried for the man I'd loved who wasn't here to help me figure out what to do. And then I dried my eyes, went back inside, and called Patricia. He proposed, I said. I know. I've been monitoring his social media. He posted about it an hour ago. June 15th, that's the wedding date. 4 months. We can work with that? Patricia paused. How are you holding up? I'm fine. Camilla, you don't have to be fine. What you're doing? I'm protecting my daughter. That's what mothers do. The next 4 months were the hardest of my life. Charlotte threw herself into wedding planning with manic energy. She brought magazines to the ranch every weekend, spreading them across the kitchen table while we looked at flowers and venues and cakes. She'd already hired a planner, an expensive one from Denver, who came with references and a portfolio of celebrity weddings. Nolan insisted we hire the best, Charlotte said proudly. He said this is a once-in-a-lifetime event and we shouldn't cut corners. Easy to say when he wasn't paying for it. The planner alone cost $15,000. Nolan came to the ranch more frequently now, sometimes with Charlotte, sometimes alone. He'd show up on Saturday mornings with coffee and pastries, wanting to help with wedding setup or discuss logistics. Really, he wanted to survey his future property. I watched him walk the fence lines, taking measurements with his phone. I saw him talking to the county assessor who happened to drive by one day. Not a coincidence, I was sure. I heard him on a call with someone he called the architect, discussing subdivision possibilities and development potential. Patricia's cameras captured it all. In March, Nolan brought up the power of attorney again. Camilla, I really think we should get this finalized before the wedding, he said. We were in my study. He'd asked to review some documents, which meant he wanted another crack at convincing me to sign away my autonomy. Why before the wedding? I asked. Because after Charlotte and I are married, the optics change. Right now, I'm just her fiancé trying to help. After we're married, it might look like I'm trying to control your assets. We want to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Impropriety, I repeated. You know what I mean. Family dynamics can be complicated. If we set everything up properly, now there won't be any questions later. Later, when he'd need the power of attorney to move my money around, to pay for his management services, to slowly drain my accounts while convincing Charlotte it was all legal and proper. I've been thinking about what you said, I told him. About my memory problems. His eyes sharpened. Yes, they're getting worse. Yesterday I couldn't remember where I'd parked my truck. I wandered around the property for 20 minutes before I found it. A lie. I'd been fixing fence posts and knew exactly where my truck was. But Nolan leaned forward, concerned and calculating in equal measure. Have you seen a doctor? Not yet. I'm afraid of what they might find. Camilla, you need to get checked out. And honestly, this makes the power of attorney even more important. If you're having cognitive issues, we need to have safeguards in place. Maybe you're right. I know I am. Look, why don't we schedule an appointment with my lawyer next week? We'll get the paperwork sorted out and then you can focus on enjoying Charlotte's wedding without worrying about all this. All right, I said. Let's do that. His smile could have lit up Denver. What Nolan didn't know was that Patricia had installed a camera in a book on the shelf behind him. She'd captured every word, every expression, every moment of him pressing a woman with cognitive issues to sign legal documents that would give him control of her finances. Elena assured me it would look terrible in court. In April, Vincent Hayes arrived in Colorado. He checked into a hotel in Denver, the same hotel where Nolan was supposedly staying to give Charlotte space before the wedding. Patricia followed him for 3 days and reported back. Vincent Hayes, 38 years old investment banker from San Francisco. He and Nolan are partners in an LLC called Pierce Hayes Development Corporation. They've bought and flipped 4 properties in the last 2 years with an average profit of $1.8 million per deal. How do they get the properties? I asked. They target elderly owners, usually widows or widowers living alone. They befriend them, gain their trust, convince them to sell for their own good. Sometimes the owners die shortly after signing preliminary agreements. Nothing's ever been proven, but the pattern is suspicious. And now they're targeting my ranch. Yes, but Camilla, this actually helps us. Vincent's involvement proves this is premeditated fraud, not just a romance gone wrong. With both of them on record discussing the plan, we have a much stronger case. Have they met here on the property? Twice. Late at night after you'd gone to bed. We have audio of both conversations. What did they say? Patricia pulled up a file on her laptop. This is from last week. They were walking near the creek, probably thought they were far enough from the house that you wouldn't hear them even if you were awake. She played the recording. Vincent's voice. I'm nervous about this. What if the old lady doesn't die? What if she lives another 20 years? Nolan. She won't. I've been researching her medication. She takes blood pressure pills, right? There are ways to interfere with that. Create a hypertensive crisis. Looks like a natural stroke, especially in someone her age. You're going to tamper with her medication. Not immediately. But if she's still alive and healthy in 6 months, if she starts getting suspicious or tries to revoke the power of attorney, then yeah, sometimes you have to help nature along. Vincent, Jesus Christ, Nolan, do you hear yourself? You're talking about murder. I'm talking about problem solving. Look, Vincent, you're either in or you're out. If you're in, you get 40% of $4.2 million. That's $1.68 million. If you're out, you get nothing, and I find another partner who's willing to do what it takes. There was a long pause. Vincent, I'm in, but after this I'm done. No more elderly marks, no more risky plays. We take this money and go legitimate. Nolan, whatever you say. After this, we won't need to work another day in our lives. The recording ended. I stared at Patricia. He's planning to kill me. This isn't speculation or hypotheticals. He's actively planning my murder. Yes, and now we have multiple recordings that prove it. Camilla, we have enough to go to the police right now. You don't have to wait until the wedding. What will happen if we go now? They'll arrest Nolan and Vincent. There'll be a trial. Charlotte will be devastated and probably won't believe any of it. Nolan will claim entrapment, that you set him up, that the recordings are out of context. His lawyer will make you look like a paranoid old woman who couldn't accept her daughter's happiness. And Charlotte will believe him. Maybe. Probably. At the very least, she'll have doubts. I closed my eyes. Then we wait. We let him think he's won right up until the moment he says I do, and then we destroy him in front of 200 witnesses. It's risky, Camilla. So is letting my daughter marry a man who wants me dead? Patricia nodded slowly. All right, but from now until the wedding, you're not alone, ever. I'm going to have someone watching the house 24/7. If Nolan or Vincent come within 50 feet of your property unsupervised, we intervene. Agreed. Agreed. May arrived with wildflowers blooming across the meadow. Charlotte came to the ranch almost daily, bringing the wedding planner, the caterer, the florist. They transformed my property into a venue, white chairs in rows facing the aspen grove, an arbor covered in climbing roses, string lights hung between trees. It's going to be perfect, Mom, Charlotte said, squeezing my hand as we watched workers install a dance floor. Everything I've ever dreamed of. I looked at her face, radiant with happiness, innocent of the nightmare she was about to marry, and almost broke. Almost told her everything. But I couldn't. Not yet. Because Patricia was right, Charlotte wouldn't believe me. She'd think I was jealous or controlling or suffering from the dementia Nolan had convinced her I was developing. She had to see it for herself. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Madison Rothschild. I nearly dropped the phone. Miss Rothschild, how did you get my number? A private investigator named Patricia Kim contacted my mother. She told us what's happening with your daughter. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm calling to warn you. Whatever you think Nolan Pierce is capable of, it's worse. He's not just a con artist. He's dangerous. How do you know? Because after our engagement ended, after my family paid him off, he came back. He showed up at my apartment one night drunk and told me that if I'd just trusted him more, if I'd convinced my father to give him power of attorney, none of this would have happened. He said it was my fault he had to move on to someone else. Did he threaten you? Not explicitly, but the way he looked at me. Mrs. Rodriguez, I think if I'd been alone in that apartment instead of having my roommate there, something bad would have happened. I got a restraining order the next day and he left me alone after that. But I still have nightmares. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want what almost happened to me to happen to your daughter. Please, Mrs. Rodriguez, stop this wedding. Tell your daughter the truth. Don't let him get that close to your family. After she hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time staring at David's picture on the wall. I hope I'm doing the right thing, I told him. He smiled back at me from the photograph, forever frozen at 58, forever proud and supportive, and certain that I could handle anything. I hoped he was right. The week before the wedding, Charlotte moved into the ranch house. I want to spend time with you before everything changes, she said, carrying suitcases up to her old bedroom. Plus, it'll be easier for all the final preparations. I should have been happy. My daughter home again, sleeping in the room where she'd grown up. But every morning when I heard her moving around upstairs, my chest tightened with anxiety. Because Nolan came by every day. He'd show up for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. He'd kiss Charlotte on the porch and then find reasons to talk to me privately. About the power of attorney paperwork that still wasn't signed. About my worsening memory problems. About how he'd handle things when the time came. Patricia's surveillance caught it all, but it didn't make me feel any safer. On Monday, 5 days before the wedding, I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard Charlotte crying in her room. I went upstairs and knocked softly. Charlotte, honey, what's wrong? She opened the door. Her eyes were red mascara smeared down her cheeks. I'm scared, Mom. My heart stopped. Scared of what? What if I'm making a mistake? What if Nolan isn't who I think he is? This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the opening to tell her everything. But then she continued, what if I'm not good enough for him? He's so successful, so smart. He could have anyone. What if he realizes he made a mistake choosing me? Not scared of Nolan. Scared of losing Nolan. I pulled her into a hug. Charlotte Rodriguez, you listen to me. You are brilliant and beautiful and funny and kind. Any man would be lucky to have you. If Nolan doesn't see that, then he's the one who doesn't deserve you. But Mom, no buts. You are enough. You have always been enough. And if someone makes you feel like you're not, that person is wrong. She cried against my shoulder for a long time. When she finally pulled away, she wiped her eyes and gave me a watery smile. Thanks, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, I said. But inside I was screaming. Because Charlotte's fears, her insecurity, her sense of inadequacy, those weren't natural. Nolan had planted them. He'd spent 6 months subtly undermining her confidence, making her feel lucky that he'd chosen her, making her dependent on his approval. It was textbook manipulation, and I'd watched it happen without being able to stop it. After Charlotte went back downstairs, I called Patricia. "I can't do this," I said. "I can't watch him destroy her self-esteem for 4 more days." "You have to. We're so close, Camilla. If you tell her now, she'll defend him. She'll think you're trying to ruin her wedding." "What if she doesn't? What if she believes me? Then Nolan disappears, finds another victim, and we never get justice. Is that what you want?" I closed my eyes. "No. 4 more days. Can you hold on for 4 more days? I don't have a choice, do I? Tuesday morning, Nolan arrived at 8 a.m. with breakfast pastries and terrible news. "Camilla, Charlotte, I need to talk to you both about something." We sat at the kitchen table. Charlotte concerned me wary. Nolan looked serious, his expression grave in a way that seemed practiced. "I got a call from my office yesterday. There's a major client issue that needs my attention. I have to go to San Francisco tomorrow for a couple of days." "But the wedding's on Saturday," Charlotte said. "I know, honey. I'll be back Friday afternoon, I promise. This is just unavoidable. But Camilla, this actually works out. I was hoping we could finalize that power of attorney paperwork before I leave. I'll have my lawyer draw up the final documents today, and we can sign them tomorrow morning before my flight." There it was. He wanted me locked in before the wedding just in case something went wrong. If I had the paperwork signed, he could start moving money even if Charlotte changed her mind at the altar. "Tomorrow seems rushed," I said carefully. "I know, but it's important to get this done. You've been having more memory issues, haven't you?" He looked at Charlotte. "Your mom told me yesterday she forgot what day it was, just completely blanked." Charlotte frowned. "Mom, you didn't tell me that." Another lie. I'd said no such thing. But if I contradicted him now, it would look like I was the one confused. "It was nothing," I said. "I was just tired." "Exactly," Nolan said smoothly. "You're tired, stressed about the wedding, not sleeping well. All the more reason to get the paperwork handled while you're still clear-headed. Once it's done, you can relax and enjoy the ceremony." Charlotte reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, maybe he's right. Maybe it would be good to have everything organized." I looked at my daughter's face, concerned, caring, completely unaware that her fiancé was trying to trap her mother into signing away her autonomy. "All right," I said. "Tomorrow morning." After Nolan left, I texted Patricia. "He's pushing for the POA tomorrow. What do I do?" Her response came immediately. "Sign it. Elena's prepared a counter document that revokes it. You'll sign that with a notary tomorrow afternoon, backdated to 1 hour before Nolan's POA. His version will be legally void. Won't he find out? Not until he tries to use it. By then, he'll be in handcuffs." Wednesday morning, Nolan arrived with his lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s named Jennifer Collins, who carried a leather portfolio and didn't smile once. "Mrs. Rodriguez," she said, shaking my hand, "I understand you want to establish a power of attorney with your daughter Charlotte and her fiancé Nolan Pierce as co-agents." "That's correct," I said, playing my role. We sat in my study. Jennifer spread documents across the desk while Nolan watched with barely concealed eagerness. Charlotte had gone to meet the florist, so it was just the 3 of us. "This document gives Charlotte and Nolan the authority to make financial and legal decisions on your behalf if you become incapacitated," Jennifer explained. "They'll be able to access your bank accounts, sell property, manage investments, essentially anything you could do yourself." "What if I'm not incapacitated? What if I just want help managing things?" "The document takes effect immediately upon signing, so yes, they could begin managing your affairs right away if you chose to let them. And there's no way to revoke it. You can revoke it at any time as long as you're of sound mind. You'd need to file a revocation with the county clerk and notify all relevant financial institutions. But if I had dementia or Alzheimer's, I wouldn't be able to revoke it. No, once you're deemed mentally incompetent, the power of attorney remains in effect until your death." I pretended to consider this. "That seems like a lot of power to give someone." "It is," Jennifer said, "which is why you should only grant it to people you trust completely." She had no idea how ironic those words were. "I trust my daughter," I said, "and I trust Nolan." The lie tasted like poison. I signed the documents. Nolan signed as co-agent. Jennifer notarized everything with her official stamp and filed copies in her portfolio. "You should receive your copies within a week," she said, "but these are effective immediately." After they left, I sat in my study and shook. Not from fear, from rage. I just signed documents giving a man who wanted me dead the legal authority to control my entire life. But 2 hours later, I was in Elena's office signing a revocation document dated and notarized to 1 hour before Nolan's power of attorney. Elena filed it with the county clerk personally, along with notifications to every bank and financial institution where I held accounts. He doesn't know it yet, Elena said, but every piece of paper he signed this morning is worthless. What if he checks? What if he calls the bank? He won't, not until after the wedding. He thinks he's won Camilla. He thinks you're locked in. His arrogance is going to destroy him. I hoped she was right. Thursday, Nolan flew to San Francisco, or so he said. Patricia tracked his phone to confirm he actually went. He's really there, she reported. Checked into the Fairmont Hotel under his own name. Either he genuinely has business, or he's establishing an alibi. For what? I don't know. But Vincent Hayes is still here in Colorado. I've had someone watching him. Yesterday he drove out to your property. My blood went cold. What did he do? Parked on the access road, walked along your fence line, took pictures. Camilla, I think they're planning something for after the wedding. Surveying the property for development potential, maybe? Or what? Patricia hesitated. Or they're planning how to stage an accident. Looking for dangerous spots. Cliffs, unstable ground places where someone could fall. I thought about the creek bed swollen with spring runoff. The rocky outcropping near the eastern fence. The old well we'd capped but never filled. I want extra security at the wedding, I said. Not just Sheriff Morrison. I want people who can move fast if something goes wrong. Already arranged. Morrison's bringing 2 deputies in plain clothes. I'll be there with my team. If Nolan or Vincent makes a move, we'll be ready. Friday afternoon, Nolan returned from San Francisco. Charlotte picked him up at the airport, and they arrived at the ranch at 6 p.m. for the rehearsal dinner. The venue looked beautiful. String lights glowed between the trees. The arbor was covered in white roses and greenery. 50 guests milled around with cocktails, laughing and congratulating the happy couple. I stood on the porch and watched Nolan work the crowd. He was charming, gracious, the perfect groom. He introduced Charlotte to his colleagues from Cordell Financial. He hugged my sister Maria and complimented her dress. He shook hands with my brother Tom and talked about football. He was a predator in a tailored suit, and nobody knew it but me. Vincent Hayes arrived fashionably late, pulling up in a rental Mercedes. He was handsome in a slick way, perfectly groomed, expensive watch-practiced smile. When Nolan introduced us, Vincent shook my hand and said, "Mrs. Rodriguez, your ranch is spectacular. You must be so proud of what you've built here." "My husband built it," he said. "I'm just taking care of it." "Well, you're doing a wonderful job. Charlotte's lucky to grow up in such a beautiful place." "She is lucky," I agreed. "This land has been in our family for 30 years. It'll be in our family for 30 more. Something flickered in Vincent's eyes. Not quite concern, but close. Good. Let him worry. The rehearsal dinner was catered prime rib and salmon roasted vegetables, a cake that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Nolan gave a toast that made Charlotte cry happy tears. "To Camilla," he said, raising his glass, "who welcomed me into this family with open arms, who's trusting me with her most precious treasure. I promise you, Camilla, I will spend the rest of my life taking care of Charlotte. She'll never want for anything." Everyone applauded. Charlotte beamed at him. I smiled and nodded and wanted to vomit. After dinner, guests began to leave. Charlotte hugged me goodnight. "I can't believe tomorrow's the day," she said. "Mom, thank you for everything. For this beautiful venue, for supporting us, for being the best mother anyone could ask for." "I love you, sweetheart," I said, "more than anything in the world." "I love you too, Mom." She left with her bridesmaids to spend the night at a hotel in Boulder, bad luck, for the groom to see the bride before the wedding, she'd said. I was alone at the ranch with my thoughts and Patricia's surveillance equipment. At midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Patricia, 2 men approaching the house from the west. "Stay inside." My heart hammered. I grabbed my phone and watched the security feed Patricia had given me access to. 2 figures moving through the darkness. Even in the grainy night vision footage, I recognized them. Nolan and Vincent. They stopped at the creek bed, maybe 50 yards from the house. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I watched them survey the area, pointing at different spots along the bank. Then Nolan pulled something from his pocket. Even through the poor video quality, I could see what it was. A small flag, the kind surveyors use to mark property boundaries. He planted it in the ground next to the creek. They were marking the land, dividing it up, planning how to subdivide my property after I was dead. I watched them for 20 minutes before they finally left, walking back to Nolan's car parked on the access road. After they drove away, I called Patricia. "Did you see that?" I asked. "Every second. I have them on 3 different cameras. They're already planning what to do with my property." "Yes. And Camilla, they planted that flag on the section of land that would be most valuable for development. They've done their homework." "Are we still going through with tomorrow?" "That's your call. We have enough evidence to arrest them now. Multiple recordings of conspiracy photographic evidence of them surveying your property without permission, the power of attorney documents that show intent to defraud. You could end this tonight." I thought about Charlotte asleep in a hotel room dreaming of her wedding day. Her perfect day that I was about to destroy. But better a destroyed wedding than a destroyed life. "We go through with it," I said. "Charlotte needs to see this with her own eyes." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed watching the clock count down the hours until dawn and thought about everything that could go wrong. What if Charlotte didn't believe the evidence? What if she thought I'd manipulated it somehow? What if Nolan convinced her that I was the villain, not him? What if I was making the biggest mistake of my life? At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went downstairs, made coffee, watched the sun rise over the mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks pink and gold. David and I had gotten married on a morning just like this one 35 years ago, right here at this ranch with 50 guests and homemade decorations and a justice of the peace who charged us $200. David had been so nervous he'd dropped the ring twice during the ceremony. I'd laughed until I cried and he'd laughed with me, and everyone said they'd never seen a happier couple. "I wish you were here," I told his picture on the mantel. "I wish you could tell me I'm doing the right thing." At 7 a.m., the wedding preparations began. Caterers arrived with trucks full of food. The florist delivered arrangements. The string quartet set up near the arbor. Charlotte's wedding planner, a woman named Stephanie, who wore a headset and carried 3 clipboards, directed everything with military precision. By 9 a.m., the ranch looked like something out of a magazine. White chairs in perfect rows. Rose petals scattered along the aisle. The arbor draped in silk and covered in flowers. Sheriff Tom Morrison arrived at 10 dressed in a suit instead of his uniform. He found me on the porch. "Camilla," he said, pulling me into a hug. "You sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway. I've got 2 deputies positioned in the crowd. If you give the signal, we move. But Camilla, you need to understand this is going to be traumatic for Charlotte, for everyone here. Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared to protect my daughter, whatever it costs." He nodded. "David would be proud of you." "David would tell me I'm crazy." "Maybe, but he'd back you up anyway." At 11 a.m., I went upstairs to get dressed. My dress was simple navy blue, knee-length, appropriate for a mother of the bride. I put on the pearls David had given me for our 20th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had I gotten so old? When had the lines around my eyes gotten so deep? The silver in my hair so prevalent? "Pull yourself together," I told my reflection. "You can fall apart later." At noon, Charlotte arrived. She looked like a princess. Her dress was ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves fitted at the waist and flowing to the floor. Her hair was swept up in an elegant twist with small white flowers tucked into the curls. She wore my mother's diamond earrings, something borrowed, and carried a bouquet of white roses and peonies. "Mom," she said when she saw me, "how do I look like the most beautiful bride I've ever seen?" She hugged me carefully, trying not to wrinkle her dress. "I'm so nervous. Is that normal?" "Completely normal. But I'm also excited and happy and scared. Is it supposed to feel like this many things at once?" "Yes, sweetheart. That's exactly how it's supposed to feel." What I didn't say, sometimes being scared is your instincts telling you something's wrong. At 1 p.m., the guests began to arrive. 200 people in their finest clothes filling the white chairs on my lawn. Charlotte's friends from college. My colleagues from my engineering days. Neighbors from the surrounding ranches. Nolan's associates from Cordell Financial. And scattered among them, hidden in plain sight, Sheriff Morrison and his 2 deputies. Patricia and her team. Elena sitting in the third row with a folder full of evidence on her lap. An army waiting for my signal. At 1:30, the string quartet began to play. The processional music swelled over the meadow, beautiful and haunting. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their pale pink dresses. Then the maid of honor, Charlotte's best friend Jessica, who I'd known since she was 7 years old and had sleepovers at our house every weekend. Then it was my turn. I walked to Charlotte's room in the house. She was standing by the window looking out at the assembled guests, her bouquet clutched in both hands. "Ready?" I asked. She turned to me and I saw the tears in her eyes. "Mom, I need to tell you something." My heart stopped. "What is it?" "I heard something 2 nights ago. I went to Nolan's hotel room to surprise him, and I heard him talking to Vincent. They were saying things about you, about the property, about what Charlotte..." She took a shaky breath. "About how after we were married they'd have access to your assets. About how you were getting confused and might need help managing things. About how this property could be worth millions if it was subdivided correctly. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought I'd misunderstood. I thought maybe they were just talking hypothetically, planning for the future being practical. I didn't want to believe that Nolan would..." She couldn't finish. "That Nolan would what? That he'd only want me for your money," she whispered. "Mom, what if I'm making a terrible mistake? What if he doesn't really love me?" This was the moment, the opening I'd been waiting for, praying for. But before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. Stephanie, the wedding planner, poked her head in. "It's time. Everyone's waiting." Charlotte wiped her eyes. "I can't back out now. There are 200 people out there. The ceremony's starting. I have to go through with it." "Charlotte, you don't have to do anything. If you're having doubts, I'm just being paranoid. Cold feet. Every bride gets nervous, right? It doesn't mean anything." She was talking faster now, convincing herself. "Nolan loves me. He proposed. We're getting married. Everything's fine." "Sweetheart." "Mom, please. I need to do this. I need to walk out there and marry him, and then I'll know for sure that I was just being silly, that I was wrong about what I heard." She was terrified. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she gripped her bouquet too tight, in the tremor in her voice. But she was going to walk down that aisle anyway, because that's what you do when you're scared of being wrong more than you're scared of being hurt. "Okay," I said quietly. "But Charlotte, I need you to do something for me." "What?" I pulled a small piece of paper from my pocket, something I'd prepared this morning just in case. 3 words written in my handwriting. "If you get out there and you realize you can't do this, if you realize that what you heard was real and you need help, I want you to give me this note. Just hand it to me and I'll handle everything. No questions, no explanations needed, just a signal." Charlotte looked at the folded paper in my hand. "What does it say?" "It says, 'Mom, help me.' That's all." She stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly she took the note and tucked it into her bouquet, hidden among the roses and peonies. "Just in case," she whispered. "Just in case," I agreed. We walked to the back door together. Through the window I could see the guests standing, turning to watch for the bride. I could see Nolan at the altar in his tuxedo, looking confident and handsome, and completely unaware of what was coming. The music swelled. The wedding march. "Ready?" I asked Charlotte one more time. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. We stepped out onto the porch. The afternoon sun was bright and warm, the sky an impossible blue. The aspens rustled in the breeze, their leaves catching the light like coins. It was a perfect day for a wedding, or for everything to fall apart. Charlotte took my arm and we began the long walk down the aisle. Every step felt like an eternity. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on us. Could hear the murmur of appreciation for how beautiful Charlotte looked. Could see Nolan's smile widening as we approached. I watched my daughter's face, saw her struggling with herself. Saw the moment she glanced at Nolan and doubt flickered across her features. Then we reached the altar. The officiant, a friend of Charlotte's who'd gotten ordained online just for this ceremony, smiled at us. "Who gives this woman to be married?" This was traditionally where I'd say "I do," or her father and I do, and then take my seat. Instead, I hesitated. Charlotte felt it. She looked at me confused, and in her eyes I saw the question she couldn't ask out loud. Is it true? Is everything I'm afraid of true? I couldn't answer. Not with words. Not here. Not now. So I simply squeezed her hand and said, "I do." Then I took my seat in the front row right next to Sheriff Morrison. The ceremony began. The officiant talked about love and commitment and partnership. Charlotte and Nolan faced each other holding hands. Nolan's smile never wavered. Charlotte's hands were shaking. The vows started. Nolan, the officiant, said, "Do you take Charlotte to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Nolan said, clear and confident. The officiant turned to Charlotte. "Charlotte, do you take Nolan to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Charlotte's hand moved to her bouquet. Everything slowed down. I watched her fingers slide between the roses and peonies. Watched her find the small piece of folded paper I'd given her. Watched her pull it out, her hand shaking so badly the whole bouquet trembled. She turned to me. Our eyes met, and she handed me the note. The officiant stopped mid-sentence. "Charlotte, is everything okay?" Charlotte was staring at Nolan now, her face pale, her eyes filling with tears. I stood up. The note was clutched in my hand, but I didn't need to open it. I knew what it said. "Mom, help me." "Stop," she said. My voice carried across the silent meadow. "Stop the ceremony." 200 people gasped. Nolan's smile finally cracked. "Camilla, what?" "Charlotte," I said, ignoring him completely. "Tell everyone what you heard. Tell them what Nolan and Vincent were discussing 2 nights ago." Charlotte took a shaky breath. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the absolute silence, everyone heard her. "I went to Nolan's hotel room to surprise him before the wedding, and I heard him talking to Vincent about my mother, about how she was confused, about how once they had power of attorney it would be easy to—" her voice broke, "to make sure she had an accident." The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, people standing up. Nolan grabbed Charlotte's arm. "That's insane. You misunderstood. You're being hysterical." I moved forward, but Sheriff Morrison was faster. He was out of his seat and next to Nolan in 3 strides, his hand on Nolan's wrist. "Let her go," Morrison said quietly. Nolan released Charlotte's arm, but his face had gone red with anger. "This is entrapment. Camilla set me up. She's been trying to sabotage our relationship from the beginning." "Is that true, Camilla?" the sheriff asked, though his tone made it clear he already knew the answer. "I have recordings," I said. I pulled out my phone, pulled up the audio file Patricia had sent me this morning, of Nolan and Vincent discussing their plan to defraud me, to control my assets through power of attorney, to stage an accident if I became suspicious or tried to revoke their access. I pressed play. Nolan's voice, crystal clear, filled the meadow. "Old woman lives alone on 200 acres. Lots of things can happen. Falls, accidents. Maybe her medication gets confused. Nothing traceable, just tragic." Vincent's voice. "You're talking about murder." Nolan. "I'm talking about nature taking its course with a little help." The recording played for 2 minutes. Every word of their conversation from the porch that night when they thought I was asleep and couldn't hear them. When it ended, the silence was deafening. Charlotte was crying. Nolan looked like he'd been punched. And Vincent was running. He bolted toward the parking area, shoving past guests in their wedding finery. Patricia's team was on him instantly. 2 men in suits, I recognized them as Patricia's investigators, tackled Vincent before he made it 10 feet. Sheriff Morrison pulled handcuffs from under his jacket. "Nolan Pierce, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiracy to commit harm against a vulnerable adult." "This is bullshit," Nolan shouted as Morrison cuffed him. "You can't arrest me at my own wedding. I have rights. I want my lawyer." "You'll get your phone call at the station," Morrison said. He looked at his deputies. "Get Vincent too. Read them both their rights." The next 20 minutes were chaos. Guests being asked to give statements. Nolan screaming about false accusations. Vincent crying and saying he'd been coerced, that Nolan had threatened him, that he'd never intended to actually hurt anyone. Charlotte stood frozen at the altar, still holding her bouquet mascara running down her face. I walked up to her slowly. "Charlotte, you knew," she said. "You've known for months." "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You'd have thought I was trying to control you. You needed to discover it yourself. So you let me plan a wedding. Let me invite 200 people. Let me walk down the aisle to marry a man who wanted you dead. I let you choose," I said quietly. "I gave you that note this morning. You could have used it before we even left the house. But you walked down that aisle, Charlotte. You stood at that altar, And when you realized you couldn't go through with it, you asked for help. I didn't rescue you, sweetheart. You rescued yourself." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she dropped her bouquet and collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I held her while the police led Nolan and Vincent away. Held her while guests slowly dispersed, some supportive, some just eager to gossip about the wedding that ended in arrests. Held her while the sun moved across the sky and the shadows lengthened. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I almost married him. But you didn't. That's what matters. I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid. Nolan is a professional con artist. He's fooled people before. Smarter people, wealthier people. You're not the first person he's manipulated, and sadly, you probably won't be the last." "What happens now?" "Now," I pulled back and looked at her tear-stained face. "Now we cancel the catering, apologize to the guests, and figure out what to do with $250 worth of wedding cake. And tomorrow we start over." Start over? Building your life, the real one. The one where you're not trying to be someone else to keep a man interested. The one where you remember that you're brilliant and strong and don't need anyone to complete you. Charlotte managed a weak smile. "That sounds exhausting." "It is, but I'll help you. That's what mothers do." The district attorney called it one of the most clear-cut cases of conspiracy she'd seen in 15 years. Between Patricia's recordings, the surveillance footage, and testimony from Madison Rothschild and Juliana Hartley, both of whom broke their NDAs to help prosecute Nolan, the evidence was overwhelming. Nolan Pierce pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and solicitation to commit harm. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 5. Vincent Hayes cooperated with prosecutors, providing additional evidence about the Pierce-Hayes Development Corporation and its previous schemes. He received 4 years in prison and agreed to pay restitution to the elderly victims they'd defrauded in previous deals. Charlotte moved back to the ranch while she recovered. She went to therapy twice a week, working through the trauma of realizing the man she'd loved had been using her. "I keep wondering what I missed," she told me one evening. We were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "What signs I should have seen." "You saw them," I said. "The way he asked about the property, the way he undermined your confidence, the way he rushed the engagement. You saw all of it, Charlotte. You just didn't want to believe what it meant." "That's almost worse. Like I knew and ignored it." "No, you hoped. There's a difference. Hope is what makes us human. The fact that you were willing to believe the best of someone you loved, that's not a weakness." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been this wise. You just weren't ready to listen." 6 months after the wedding that never happened, Charlotte started dating again. Carefully, slowly, with her eyes wide open. She met Jake at a coffee shop. He was a high school teacher, coached basketball, and had the most genuine smile I'd ever seen. When she brought him to meet me, I watched him carefully. Watched how he looked at Charlotte like she was interesting, not like she was useful. Watched how he asked about her work, her hobbies, her thoughts on things, not about her family or her finances. "What do you think?" Charlotte asked after Jake left. "I think he seems nice. Just nice." Nice is underrated. Nice is what you should be looking for. "What about passionate, exciting?" "Passionate and exciting fade. Nice lasts. Your father was nice, Charlotte. Every day of our marriage he was kind and considerate and nice. That's worth more than butterflies and grand gestures." She smiled. "I'm not rushing anything this time." "Good. Take your time. Figure out who you are when you're not trying to impress anyone." As for me, I expanded David's garden. I planted new roses varieties I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I added a stone bench with David's name on it, placed where you could see the sunset over the mountains. I spent my days working the land, fixing fences, feeding horses, and living the life David and I had built together. The ranch was still worth over $4 million. I still had $8.3 million in total assets. And Charlotte still didn't need to know the exact numbers. What she needed to know was that she was loved, that she was protected, that she had a mother who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe. One evening about a year after the wedding, Charlotte found me in the garden. She'd been living back in Denver for a few months, rebuilding her life, and she'd come for her weekly visit. "Mom," she said, settling onto the bench next to me, "can I ask you something? Anything? Do you ever regret it, letting it go so far. If you'd told me sooner, I could have avoided all that pain. I thought about that for a long moment. No, I said finally, because if I'd told you sooner, you would have blamed yourself for not seeing it. You would have wondered if I was right, or if I was just being controlling. This way you discovered the truth yourself. You made the choice to ask for help. And Charlotte, you grew from it. You're stronger now than you were before. I don't feel stronger. I feel broken. Broken things heal, and when they do, the place where they broke becomes the strongest part. I put my arm around her. You're going to be okay, sweetheart. Better than okay. Promise, promise. We sat together as the sun dropped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Somewhere in the meadow, a bird called. David's roses bloomed around us, filling the air with their sweet perfume. Mom, Charlotte said softly. Yes, thank you for protecting me, even when I didn't know I needed protecting. That's what mothers do, I said. We stand guard, we stay vigilant. We protect our children with everything we have for as long as we're breathing. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. The last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear above the mountains. Inside the ranch house, lights glowed warm and welcoming. This was home. This was family. This was what David and I had built, not just property and assets, but a sanctuary. A place where people were safe and loved and valued for who they were, not what they owned. Money can't buy moments like this, but it can buy the security to enjoy them without fear. And in the end, that's the real value of wealth. Not what it displays, but what it protects.